Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Drones on Campus Supporting Research, Teaching, and Administration presentation for the 3C GIS Day. Today we have three speakers that will be giving 15-minute presentations. For this, feel free to, if you need closed captioning, you can go into the bottom of the screen that says CC to add those. We have other events going on for this week that you can find on the website, which is 3cgisday.github.io. And then also tomorrow we'll be having our keynote presentation at 11 a.m. and the topic is going to be the case for an Earth achieved by Dr. Chris Fisher. So our first presenter will be Ben Gorham. He is the Research and Data Specialist in the Friedman Center for Digital Scholarship at Case Western's Kelvin Smith Library. And I will stop sharing my screen so you will be able to see that. And feel free also to put anything in the Q&A box at any time. Okay.
Okay, thank you for that. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great, wonderful. Thank you for having me here today. I am Ben Gorham. I am the Friedman Center for Digital Scholarships Research Data and GIS Specialist over at Case Western. And I'm going to talk today a little bit about how we have been utilizing drones in my, my archaeological excavations over in Sicily for the past few years. And I think it's really appropriate that I'm going first today because this is not meant to be a state-of-the-art, cutting-edge representation of the newest and sexiest drones, but instead how an archaeological project started embracing them and started integrating them into their ongoing work as long ago as 2014 is when we started doing it. So yes, from dirt to digital, utilization of drones at Morgantina, Sicily. Let's see if I can, there we go. So Morgantina is a Hellenistic Greek and Roman city, and right in the middle of Sicily there in the bottom right that you can see. It's separated primarily into three locations of interest for our excavations. It's this long 2-kilometer ridge, kind of right in the middle of this beautiful rolling hills and farmland, as you can see on Google Earth here. We've got these three different zones: the Contrada Agnese, the Agora, and the Cittadella. And most of our work has been taking place over here in the Contrada Agnese, right on the outskirts of the city. So that's where we're going to be focusing some of our investigation today. As you can see from this map of Morgantina, the Agora has been pretty thoroughly excavated. We've got a lot of buildings that have been brought to light since the 1950s there, including these nice houses up here on the West Hill. And then there's not a lot else that's been excavated. The Contrada Agnese had a little bit that's been exposed. So that's where we wanted to dive in to really see what was going on at the city's edge as it collapsed, as the city itself kind of stopped being occupied around the turn of the millennium. The place vanished by about 100 BC and was only rediscovered many hundreds of years later. And in 1955, excavations began there, and I think it was under the auspices of Princeton primarily. And you can see some of these really big trenches that they were dropping in the Agora way back then. And we've been kind of picking it up since then and looking into new ways of documenting our excavations ever since. And you can see from this kind of retrospective here that our technology has actually been getting worse over the years. You know, we had an awesome blimp for aerial photography in the 1980s. Then we had a step ladder. And then in 2014, we just had a guy sitting on two people's shoulders to take photographs from above. This is actually the dig director there. So, but eventually, you know, that abysmal trajectory aside, we did start trying to integrate drones to kind of take back our technological prowess and documentation around 2014. So in 2014, we started pulling in one drone, this little quadcopter up there on the top right there, just to do some daily flyovers of our trenches so that we could have an ongoing kind of flipbook excavation record of what we were digging up. So we had one flight every single day to kind of study how the terrain was changing, how the monuments were being exposed, what new features were becoming visible, that sort of thing. And then a year or two later, I guess we had a little bit more money, so we went ahead and bought this It's a big old octocopter up there to do much larger and more robust flights. And I'm going to kind of detail what these guys did. So we had these two drones. Tina was what we named the little one. Morgantina is the site, so it sounds like tiny Tina. Morgantina was our little quadcopter, and she had a little Canon PowerShot. And then Tuna, because it was the second one, it's much bigger, was the octocopter's name, and she had a nice big Sony Alpha 6000 with a brushless gimbal on her, so we could do much bigger flights with her. And just sort of here's a comparison of the two different drones that we integrated into our workflow. The octocopter was bigger, obviously, much stronger, so she could resist the weather and the wind a lot better, changes in pressure and getting buffeted around. Better battery life, so we could do some longer flights with a much larger, higher megapixel camera with the brushless gimbal mount so that the photos were always level. And we could do much larger, longer, higher flights over larger areas of the excavation with Tuna. But Tina, being the OG, was something that we still like to use and rely on for quick and dirty flights, something that we could use to get underneath kind of tree canopy where there was stuff, weave in and out of buildings where necessary, and just kind of a much faster deploy than Tuna. Didn't require as much setup. And pretty much every day we would use this little mission planner software, just a little free software that you can grab to load in a series of waypoints on Google Maps, Google Earth, determine the altitude that you want your drone to fly to, how long you want them to sit there, should they pitch, should they yaw, should they rotate, that kind of thing. And then they move on to the next point in the flight path. So you set this up over your excavations, and then you can just deploy the drone really quickly and get a nice daily capture of everything that's going on. We also used these drones to capture aerial photography of sites or parts of the site that have never really been studied in this way before. They've been studied on foot, but never from the air very well. And this here is a pretty high-res image of the Cittadella, the citadel, one of the oldest occupations at Morgantina, where we can see the architecture that's been excavated, but we can also start to identify looter pits, little divots in the terrain where tomb robbers show up in the middle of the night and try to steal all of our treasures. Well, all of our academic treasures. And we could use Tuna to fly much larger, cover 150 meter altitudes, go all the way across this entire plateau to capture these images never before seen. But then we also used Tina to weave in and out of trees. You can see these tree shadows here, but you'll notice there are no trees in the image. It's because Tina was flying underneath their canopy, underneath their branches here, so that we could get some nice orthographic imagery of these architectural remains here that have never been able to be studied or measured like this before drones. We also have just basically an attempt to chronicle every monument, every big extant bit of architecture along the site with these drones. Here's another example of the way we can use these drones to get really fun aerial imagery that we can then flatten out to orthophoto measurements, so we can use them for architectural measurements, that kind of thing. But you'll notice this shadow here, again, like the tree in the other one, this little feature is actually covered by a roof that's just sort of on stilts. But because we could fly the drone low enough and pitch the angle of the camera, it could kind of get underneath that roof and then capture the imagery as if the roof weren't there. Haven't figured out how to get rid of the shadow yet, but that's okay. It's a fun way to kind of reconstruct things that aren't normally visible to aerial photography. Here's some other examples of just some of the monuments that we captured with these drones. We got some nice raking morning light here. These are the houses on the West Hill. These would be the houses of the wealthier residents of the city. Each one of them is just a dedicated flight with the drone. Send it up, fly it around, bring it home, and then process it. We used Agisoft Metashape and Photoscan to process almost all of these flights. Take a few hundred pictures, stitch them together into a single object that makes a 3D model, and then flatten that model out and you get these really nice ortho photos for documentation, display, and dissemination. But the really fun thing that I like to do with the drones on site was use them to make this daily flipbook of our excavations. Because the flight path was always saved to the drone's memory, we can send it up and it'll fly the same route every single day. And we get just this nice little chronological flipbook of what's happening. This is just three kind of, you can see features get revealed and then get removed as we're digging down. You can see the progress from day to day as we move forward in time with these little flipbooks. They're not perfectly aligned here, but they are all perfectly aligned in our GIS, because all of this is done with GIS in mind, right? This is GIS Day, and what we were using drones for was to create raster base maps of our excavation so that we could layer them all together in a GIS, use them to draw features, to assign attributes to things. You can see here kind of that workflow. Instead of the architect being on site having to do hand measurements from a total station with a chalkboard and a pencil and paper, we can just upload this ortho photo to a GIS. He can draw directly on top of it, and we get this really nice kind of interactive GIS document that has all this information layered together. Another thing that we were using our drones for was to, basically create a 100% capture of everything that was present on the site. So every monument, every trench, every single archaeological context or stratigraphic unit that we dug through, and pretty much every single day, weather permitting, we would document all of this information. So it's a huge wealth of data that we created that we could then digitize, make 3D models of, and then upload to places like Sketchfab so that they're like preserved, they're sortable, they're filterable, and you can kind of pick and choose what you want to investigate. This is really nice because it preserves something closer to an objective record of the excavation. Traditional methods of recording archaeology would often just be a few notes in a journal about like the color of the soil, what was found in it, and then you move on to the next page. Maybe one or two photographs if it was worth taking a picture of. But with this, there's no subjective interpretation here. It's the actual 3D model of the stratigraphic unit, of the context, that anyone can come back later and study further, perform measurements on, see how it compares to other features in the site. Because again, every single one of these was geo-referenced such that it plugs into a GIS and lines up exactly with its real world components. We were also using these drones to kind of capture the kind of the wonkier terrain changes. This is a really old topographic map with two kind of zones of interest that we flew the drone over so that we could get much nicer, higher resolution 3D models showing the terrain change. And this is some excerpts from Agisoft and I think Meshmixer kind of showing those features here, where we can see the terrain popping out and then also the architecture coming through. And we used these kinds of drone flights to help inform what would become virtual reality interfaces as well as just GIS information. The GIS document that was built from this sort of stuff had all these different layers of, you can see the raster base map here that we drew features on top of. So we've got nice kind of overlay of raster and vector data here. Each of the walls was created as a polygon, assigned numbers, assigned a date so that we could kind of perform those studies. And then you can see that we also were able to overlay all of our excavation, all of our artifact finds as well, make those sortable and findable here so that we can see distributions of different types of artifacts, maybe sort them by elevation, pull out specific kind of categories, perform density analysis, that sort of stuff, all in the context of our drone images. Here's just some more examples of how this was all integrated with the GIS, with the stratigraphic units themselves shown as polygons here in red. Each of those is of course connected to a database that you can browse through FileMaker, which then allows you to kind of see all of the documentary information about that context, that stratigraphic unit, a description of it, and then more information when you get into the details, its elevation, its northings and eastings, any kind of data that we were able to retrieve from the field. It's embedded in this FileMaker Pro database, which is then linked through the GIS, blah, blah, blah. So a nice way to use the drones to kind of build this digital nexus of information for our excavations. I mentioned that we built a little bit of VR out of this stuff, a little bit of augmented reality too. I don't think much of this got past the prototyping phase. It's pretty old at this point, so I apologize for the resolution there. But one of the things that the GIS let us do and that the drones let us do was create augmented reality interfaces so that, say you're excavating in 2016 and you need to know where the trenches were from 2015. You can load up your AR, point your phone's camera at the field where you're digging and flip through previous year's trench models or trench lines here in red to see where things were a year ago. So you know exactly where to dig this year, where not to dig, what's a context that's already been excavated, what's contaminated, blah, 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 that sort of thing. And then also to render architectural reconstructions of the buildings based on their measurements where they actually are in the field. So instead of just seeing those footprints, those bare remains of the buildings, you can actually see what they would have looked like reconstructed as you're walking around with that AR. And here's just another example of like that trench view being pulled up in the AR with the little artifacts here being represented as little pyramid dots in the AR interface. So just a fun little experimental thing that we can do to to play with how AR and VR can integrate with ongoing excavation work, and just more kind of, the process of doing that, survey it in, map it to the GIS here with the drone imagery, and then embed that in the augmented reality interface as well. And then, of course, we do have the virtual reality space as well, which is available only for folks who come visit me at the Friedman Center for Digital Scholarship at Kelvin Smith Library, unfortunately. But if you have the HTC Vive, you can load it up, put on your headset, and walk around the ancient city as it was reconstructed. And I just wanted to show you briefly my last minute or two here. I mentioned that we upload all of these models to Sketchfab so that we have this kind of objective rendering of the data so that we can share this stuff and make it more available. This is one of our drone flights, and you can see that we got really good kind of oblique views of the vertical surfaces of the walls as well. Hundreds and hundreds of these kinds of things that are now sortable and explorable online for the members of our team who are now dispersed across the world. And then, we have plenty of other things uploaded to our Sketchfab as well. 3D models of the monuments that you can see. Like this is one of the very early ones that we did, I think in 2014 with the little drone. We'll see if this loads. It did a second ago. Yeah, just kind of showing the some of the big public features of the Agora that have been long excavated. The theater, ancient Greek theater, which is still in use today. Actually, you can go sit on these seats and see performances pretty much every summer. But just ways to kind of preserve this information and get it more accessible, because Morgantina is not a site that is easy to explore or get to. It's in the middle of Sicily, kind of in the middle of a desert, not super fun to try to get people to visit. So making these things available via drones, via 3D modeling, and via GIS has been a great opportunity to get that word out. Yeah, so that's me. Thank you very much.
Perfect, thank you. And a reminder that you're able to enter in your questions at any time using that Q&A button below. So feel free to add your questions. So next we're going to be moving along to Chris Strausbo. He is the Educational Technologist and UAS Coordinator for Engineering Technology Services and a lecturer in the Center for Aviation Studies at The Ohio State University. So you can take it away, Chris.
Excellent. And Ben, really enjoyed getting to relive my archaeological days and can't wait for a new season to hopefully kick off, because just as Ben has mentioned, UAS drones, they have a lot of breadth and opportunities, both at a university level and also in the industries at large. And what I'm going to kind of do is I'm going to sit right between Ben's talk and the talk that Aaron will probably be giving, and kind of talk a little bit about how do we integrate drones or drone data into the curriculum. And so I'm going to kind of start a little bit from where Ben left off and go a little bit deeper into the technologies that are driving that. And then also I will start talking about how we actually utilize the drones. My role has been the primary drone pilot for the College of Engineering. The last 18 months, I've just stepped into the instructor role as well as the director for Learning Tech this semester. And just in the last 18 months, we have created 40,000 acres of research data across the state of Ohio for a number of different faculty members and programs, and also creating data sets that can be used by multiple groups as well. But let me make sure. All right, the first foundation is there's names that go along with this. So I'm gonna take it down to the base level. UAS is unmanned aerial systems. This is really the term that you are going to see adopted and used the most. So drones pretty much is anything that is unmanned. So whether that is undersea submersible that's mapping the ocean floor, or whether it is your Grubhub delivery robot rolling around the campus near you, like OSU. So drones don't get really specific. It's just anything that's doing its own thing. through programming. The term that we used to use was UAV, unmanned aerial vehicles, but you're starting to see that picked up by advanced air mobility, the flying taxis. So we're going to be talking about UAS, and UAS specifically as a tool. So just as Ben had mentioned, when you start integrating software and different cameras to the drone, it allows you to create different types of data set that can be used. And on GIS Day, we're going to be specifically talking about not just the RGB maps and topography that we're used to seeing, but also the different types of spectral bands that can create data sets for very specific use cases like algae blooms or agricultural research. So what takes the drone into being just a UAS, a platform, is when you start integrating in the apps to go along with it. So Pix4D or Drone Deploy basically communicate with the drone and allow you to drop boxes over spaces, and it will program the drone to take pictures at specific places that ultimately will allow you to throw it into photogrammetry engines at the end. So photogrammetry engines, there's overlap between images, and it is able to create those 3D models and maps that we just saw in Ben's talk. The great thing about the drone is because it has GPS and oftentimes an advanced GPS on the device itself, every photo is geo-rectified. And when you actually put those into the engine itself, the photogrammetry engine, it'll be able to create that accurate X, Y, and Z of the site that you are doing, just based on how it flew the site because of that GPS built in it. Personally, I've been using Pix4D for a few years now, but there's a lot of different opportunities, a lot of different software, Context Capture, Agasoft, Drone Deploy, you name it. There's some really good softwares out there. Also, Esri has their own version that runs the Pix4D engine as well. So really, you start out by turning on the drone, opening up the app on your phone or your iPad, and selecting the type of mission that you're going to do. Typically, if you're doing just for a map, it's going to be a 2D where the camera is facing straight down, nadir. But if you're wanting to create those digital twins, those 3D models, then you do a double grid, and that moves the camera to an oblique position, and it does a double pattern so that you can get multiple different sides of things. So if you have a wall, you're going to be able to see more than just one side of the wall, but another side of the wall as well. And you just draw a box. It'll tell you how much battery that you need. So in this case, it was going to take 61 minutes of flight, which would probably be 3 to 4 batteries to cover that. In this case, it was a 7-minute flight with a double cross pattern because it was much smaller. But you're using these apps and these platforms to create data sets. It isn't cheap to do. Oftentimes you can see the prices start really going up, but at the same time, it allows you to create very robust data sets. And when we're talking to a scale of 40,000 acres, it really is useful. And the main question people will say is, well, why UAS? Why would I use a drone for this process when I can just pull from a satellite? And it is about freshness of the data and also the resolution. This is just an example of the resolution that you can see. This was from a satellite, and this is from a drone. And this was very early on with an 8-megapixel camera. The current drone that we're flying has a 42-megapixel camera. And so the detail, you can see a small rock and know within 2 centimeters X, Y, and Z where that rock is in the world. In the 122 acres of Metro Park construction, you're able to drill in and see this tiny object in a space of 122 acres. However, you can also build 3D models from it with a lot of different types of techniques. So orbits and also free flying the surface model. So really, you start adding to the drone with different cameras, different techniques, and you can create an enormous amount of data sets. And I promise I'm going to get to the education here in just a second, but this is really where it started integrating for us at Ohio State. So it all started with one faculty member saying, wouldn't it be great if I could have some photos for my student from above of this site that we're working on? So we were able to not only create a map, we could give them photos, we could give them videos, but we also were able to create a 3D model. These landscape architects were able to build directly into the project. However, a lot of our agricultural research or our landscape architects really need that multispectral to be able to see what effects are happening in the environment based on changes or changes over time or changes of the season. So we've added multispectral sensors that are finely tuned for very specific wavelengths of light, or thermal, being able to find underwater or underground pipes for different projects. So there's the research components, but also you're starting to really integrate in creating data sets for students. And once they start getting the bug for these types of things, you can go to Best Buy and pick up a drone. Technically, you can go to Best Buy, pick up a drone and start mapping today. But that's where the education comes in, as you start talking about the regulations, what you can do, how you do it better, knowing that cloudy days are better for mapping than partially cloudy days. And then also you start getting into these sensors and what do these sensors do and what are the range? Just because you can get a thermal sensor for $1,000 doesn't mean it's going to get you the data sets that you're going to do or that you're going to need for your project. So we're going to just kind of skip forward, but you can see that you're going to be finding these drones in a lot of different industries, which is really setting up the need for creating robust curriculum and opportunities for students to be able to not only earn their certifications like the FAA's remote pilot certification, the Part 107, but also industry certifications as well. Which is where we're going to get into the second part of this talk, which is the multiple different pathways to integrating UAS into education. The first pathway that we actually did was mostly providing data sets for faculty members teaching in a specific area, whether they wanted some data, a map of the Cuyahoga River downtown Cleveland near the harbor for a fisheries class, or whether they wanted to be able to create a set of park or a playground equipment for Glacier Ridge Metro Park. We are able to create the data sets to give to the students to be able to work and build their specific project on top of it. However, we've also started with small group training. So whether it's student employees that are looking, I'm really interested in this, how do I start the pathway of utilizing UAS and becoming a pilot myself? So you also have these small groups and these interest groups that start helping navigate. And then ultimately, we have formalized our curriculum to create the start of what will become a minor or even a major in UAS technology. This semester, we just started our first course, Aviation 3194, that is focused on how do you get your pilot's license? How do you get your first understanding of what it takes to be a pilot, the different types of equipment that there are, what the use cases are, all of those different things. And we've actually partnered with Unmanned Safety Institute so that way that when a student makes it through the program, it's not just, yay, I'm a pilot, yay, I have some experience. They move into I have these certifications that are recognized by industry. And at the same time, I can also track and log all of my hours on all these different platforms. And so this idea of it started with just providing assets for classroom to moving into formalized, and we still do all of the above as we go in. But at the same time, you have to kind of understand where to get started as well. So these are all the drones that we have had in our fleet since I started at the Knowlton School, which is part of the College of Engineering. I actually started with the original Mavic at the top, the Mavic Pro. Then we started adding some gadgets and gizmos to try to build in those different types of sensors. So this is with an NDVI sensor. Yes, it didn't work very well with the Centera dropdown, but it gave us the taste of what multispectral data was. We also have a Peridinofe that has a thermal. Again, didn't work very well, but it gave us a taste of what it is. And then ultimately, we've moved all the way up into a wing fixed. There are really great cases for all of the above. And this is something that I tell my students, and also as we're building our program is, well, in order to do drones, you kind of need a drone. So how do you go about the idea of what you need? And so just kind of give an approximate size comparison, the Mavic Mini can be very, very small, and compared to the Wingtra, which is something that you stick your arms out and it's about that wingspan. But pricing can also vary a lot on this. So this, you're getting the real practical taste of the drones here. So it can be as cheap as something that's $250 that gives you that ability for flight testing, to something that will jump you into your research level with a Wingtra or beyond. We're looking at a number of different systems, including something that will go beyond visual line of sight through the FAA waivers. So there's a lot of different things. And again, not everything is perfect for. So what is good to learn on? Obviously, you're not going to learn on the $40,000 Wingtra. You're going to be learning on some of these older systems, whether it is the Tello, just so that you can get used to the stick controls, or an old Mavic that you won't feel bad about crashing, or maybe you're looking at something that's a little bit more future-proof with a Mavic 2 or the brand new Mavic 3 that was just released last week or the week before. Or you can go into say Skydio that has the amazing autonomous features with a price, or the tried and true workhorse of mapping, which is the Phantom 4. So what is good for photos and videos? Again, you have your certain groups that are perfect for that. Again, I would say for video, you're going to be really looking into this realm if you're wanting to do anything big. That's what we tell our students. But at the same time, you can start doing it with something as small as a Mavic Mini, or even a drone that you build yourself and go with FPV. But when you start getting into mapping, this is where I get my bug. Not all drones that have a camera are good for mapping. Mainly it's because of the shutter type. So ultimately you want, if you can do it, a mechanical shutter, because that allows you to fly a lot faster while you're taking pictures. So the best one for small sites are going to be your Phantom 4. Large sites are going to be into fixed wing, whether it's a Wingtra or a SenseFly or a Census or any number of different drones that are in that category. But ultimately, all of these drones that have a camera and have a GPS can be mapped. Some do it better than others. If you're going research grade, though, you really have to step up the game. So typically, most drones that you're mapping, your accuracy is going to be a few feet, X, Y, and Z. Whereas if you want research grade, you really need to start adding ground control points for ones that don't have an advanced GPS. So all of these, you would just have visual targets that you use survey equipment to say this is X, Y, and Z down to 2 centimeters, and then you in post-processing merge all the data together. Whereas if you add something that has post-processing kinematic or RTK, real-time kinematic, those are an advanced sensor or an advanced GPS that will give you that accuracy while flying. So there's pluses to minuses to all of them. The big thing is size. If you're wanting to map in an hour and you're doing a lot of large scale stuff, the most you can do in an hour with a Phantom is really 60 acres to get that resolution. Whereas in a single flight with a Wingtra, you can do about 400 acres. And again, that will be with less than 5 centimeter accuracy, X, Y, and Z. So we teach all the students about the different types of drones, what they're good for. But if you're going down the mapping realm, that RTK, that PPK, and even that fixed wing are really game changers. And also having the ability to change your payloads as well. As you get into larger drones, you have the ability to add different multispectral sensors. MicaSense is the leader in that. We have for our RGB, the RX-1R, and then tying it to base stations as well. So for us, we're going to continue to provide industry platforms for our students to be able to learn on. And I know Aaron will talk in a little bit about some of the more advanced platforms that we have been using, but as a campus community, we want to be able to show off some of the later sensors like LiDAR, or we want to be able to test things and get students used to what's coming down the pipeline with cargo or spring. And so you've got to get into these platforms that can be used by a few around campus, but can really give kind of an educational platform for students to be able to learn on. Hopefully we are going to get into LiDAR, tying back to archaeology. If you see something about missing cities and the jungle, LiDAR is typically going to be your thing, because it's not necessarily vegetation penetrating, but it allows you to be able to map below the tree canopy as well. And my favorite tip right now, FlightAware, if you are interested in this allows you to see all the air traffic that's happening above you. So yeah, there's just kind of a taste of what we are starting to integrate into the classroom, both from data sets, but also pilot training as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Chris. So next, our speaker will be Aaron Kidwell. He is a senior GIS analyst with the Facilities, Information, and Technology team at The Ohio State University.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Just want to make sure that I'm like, you can't see me because my lighting in my office is terrible. So, okay. So what I'm going to talk about today, first of all, thanks Ben and Chris for your talks. They were great. Ben, I especially want to thank you because now I know how to pronounce Agora. I've religiously been doing the New York Times crossword puzzle for over 10 years. And now I'm confident that when I see ancient meeting place that I can type it or write it in as Agora and not Agora. So appreciate that. So what I'm going to talk about is just basically getting a drone program off the ground. Can you guys see my screen? Okay. And with that,
Aaron, you are not screen sharing yet.
oh, not if I hit. Okay, my bad. Okay, now there we go.
Perfect.
Okay, great. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about is basically getting a drone program off the ground. About 3 years ago, I work in the Office of Planning and Real Estate, Planning Architecture and Real Estate now it's called. We do a lot of planning things, obviously planning for the campus, for, buildings and whatever, all the physical stuff that goes into our campus. So we had a good use case for it, for getting a drone, starting a program. None of us had even discussed it at that point. And so we went in and we got we decided we were going to just do this. Nobody knew how to fly a drone. Nobody knew how to do it. Nobody was registered, had a license, anything like that. But we just went in head first. So what we wanted to do, first of all, we came up with some reasons why we want to do it, some mission objectives, you could say. We wanted to obtain higher resolution imagery. We take care of the OSU GIS base map, the campus map. So we're always updating this. Always updating it. There's always construction. There's always plants and bushes being torn down or taken down and put up, just whatever, anything that you can see on campus that is changing. We're keeping track of that in a GIS based map. So we wanted to be able to get some higher resolution imagery to help us to make those adjustments in our base map. We wanted to be able to do it on a quicker intervals. We wanted to, like Chris mentioned, we wanted to investigate some applications for thermal and non-thermal roof and envelope assessments, asset inspections, and any other thing that would pop up. So we basically just think it's been a great technology. We started out, we got a Matrice 210, a DJI Matrice 210, which is above the Phantom. It's kind of a workhorse, more of an industrial workhorse type drone. It's a big drone. It's got you can put two cameras on it at one time. And we over the years, we've seen that this is such a badass drone. We kind of called it. And so going along with Ben on this also, we gave it a name. So if you're familiar with the 1970s movie called Billy Jack, he's kind of a badass. So we just named it Billy Jack. So we thought that was kind of cool. So we bought that and we had to figure out what kind of software we wanted to use. And so we went together and got skip this. This was our first flight, but I just want to go to get into some things. So what we did, we got the site scan software, which Chris mentioned, that uses the Pix4D. We paid whatever X amount of dollars for all this stuff. And then like last year, Esri purchased site scan and has integrated into their platform now. So it's even made it even more effective for us. So the first thing we wanted to do before we could take it out and fly it, we wanted to learn what we had to do. We had to go through the Part 107 courses and things like that to get our licenses. We had to pass the knowledge test. We had to register our drone. And then after 2 years, you have to renew that certificate. So now that we've been doing it for 3 years, we've actually, we've had to re-register the drone. We've had to renew our certifications. And this started out, there was 2 of us flying this drone. It was myself and then Andrew Neal, who was with the university for 4 or 5 years, and he's now elsewhere. And so we went through this together. We went through the training course together online, and we got our certifications. So first thing you need to do is, get your certifications. We're going to skip. This was our first flight, but I'm going to skip that. Obviously, I've mentioned. So we got our hardware and our software. We went with the Matrice 210. We thought it was pretty cool. It's been fantastic. It uses the DJI Go 4 app along with our pre-programmed missions and site scan, which is now, like I mentioned, part of Esri. So, and I'm not going to go into detail on any of this stuff because it's basically like what they were just showing in the previous 2. You plan out your missions, it flies it, and then you can take your software and upload it. So this is one I will show you. This is our first flight. We're trying to figure out how to get this thing. So we went out to a park here, decided we would fly the base paths, and we didn't do a very good job. This is our first flight. So you can see we're just kind of like jerky with it, herky-jerky, flying around fly way past second base, and then we're going to basically fly into the stands here if this was me running a base path. So yeah, it took some practice, but it was actually pretty quick to learn, pretty quick to pick up. These drones are extremely easy to fly. So we were very intimidated to begin with, but then as we actually got out in the field and started flying these things manually, they were pretty much a piece of cake. That you can send it up to 400 feet and then just let it hover there. It's pretty good stuff. So once we got our drone and we practiced flying it, we wanted to figure out how we could get our some flight requests out into the university for whatever requests might come up, because we had originally, to begin with, we had some requests from construction, from FOD and FDC, wanting to see some flights, some construction flights over time, like basically the same thing Ben showed. So we wanted to document certain construction builds and things like that from the ground up. So we, in Smartsheet, we developed a drone flight request app. So we would have people go in and put their project name and things like that in there. So we would get an automatic email telling us someone has requested a flight. So once we got that flight on on our radar, then we would have to go through the Office of Academic Affairs to get our request done. And Chris knows all about that. Chris, I have to mention too, that he didn't really mention much, but Chris and I have been partners now for a year, I guess. Not me specifically, but our department and then the College of Engineering. He's been fantastic. We've learned a lot from Chris. We went in on the wing trip purchase together, so we own that half and half, but it's Chris's drone basically, because he's the one that flies it and knows it like the back of his hand. So,
But we couldn't do it without you, Aaron.
well, I appreciate that, but yeah. So once we get our flights, part of the process too was setting up our own flight planning kind of spreadsheet, which there's some better stuff out there. But to begin with, this was what we used, because through Smartsheet, it would automatically populate these fields, some of these fields here when someone put in that request. And then we would just go in and, change whatever the altitudes of the flights, the number of images we captured, how many videos or how many batteries we use, things like that. So it's been pretty successful for us. It's easy for us to keep track of, and it's easy for other people in our departments to actually go in and view these things. So one of the big things was, obviously we wanted to update imagery. So this is just a screenshot, obviously, of Esri's site scan. It's got all the aerial images and things we've taken. This is just a specific area. And under each of these, there's, 4 or 5 or 6, maybe 7 different images of the same location that fly. We go out and fly the same programmed flight, like Ben mentioned earlier, kind of do the same thing. And so this has given us our easiest way so far to make this publicly available for consumption, just going out and putting these things in and then go in and get some information about them. Some of the use cases, like I had mentioned, construction. This is I think this is I forget what the ophthalmology building, maybe. I forget exactly which one this is, but it's over on Neal Avenue. So we documented that going up. We did the change. We wanted to document the Cannon Drive, how it was. This was actually from we didn't get this. This is just from Google, but you can see the Google Earth image of what Cannon Drive looked like. And then we went in and we started flying it after they realigned it. And this is inside the software here. After we fly it, we would bring it into this. It would tell us how many photos we took. These are the actual photo locations that it would fly, north and south to get all these images. From that, we turned it we processed it through into an aerial image, orthomosaic. And again, you can see, zooming in into a specific location, you can see stuff on this car's dashboard as it was driving through the intersection. So it's been pretty awesome. This has been really helpful in mapping, like I said, updating our GIS base map, just because you can get down to this level of detail and really fill in anything that you need to fill in. Some other data products are, it provide contour data, hill shade, elevation models, and then it would produce a point cloud, millions of points from these flights too. You can see here. So this is basically the 3D or the 3D model of just point cloud. So this is not like the aerial images itself. It's just how it turned it into a point cloud, which is pretty awesome to see. And then also it does do the 3D, like David Ben showed before. So there's all kinds of things out there for people to view, to get some, different angles of planning areas that they're looking at. And this was a use case. The first one we went out and did was, this is where the Central Sterile Supply Building is now on Kinney Road, up on Northwest Campus. This was the first flight we did. It was in August of 2019, and then September 19, November, January, and then just 7-8 months later, there's a building there. So we were able to track all of that. And there was actually on this site, which is another use case coming up that I'll show you in a second. There was a tree here that had some birds in it, and I'll explain that in a second. But so we've done it for other kinds of campus planning efforts, parking studies. We had some requests to go out at specific times of the day, like at the busiest times, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, things like that, to see how full the parking lots were. As you can see, these are really full. This is kind of the same time frame. There's nothing here. So they weren't necessarily utilizing these for faculty and staff or students. So I'm not sure what they did with the planning, but they were able to go in and see that, hey, these are pretty full. Okay. Maybe we have some other opportunities we can use. And this is the Hawk's Nest that was on that location that I just showed you, the Central Sterile Supply. We had to go out. They had a tree there that they had to cut down, and they couldn't do it because there was a Hawk's Nest in it that had probably some babies in it at that time. So we went out and flew we did 3 flights, and we saw, okay, there are babies in there, so they can't chop this tree down yet. So a couple of weeks later, we went out, and they're actually fledglings now. So they're a little, you can see the change in color of the hawk. And then a couple weeks later, there was an empty nest. So that gave them the confidence that they could go in and unfortunately cut the tree down. I've done some graffiti roof inspections on campus. This is the Wexner Center, the Art Center. Someone was going up and tagging it all over. So I was able to go up and just quickly tell them, yes, this is happening. These are the locations, so you can send people up. FOD wanted us to document a large tree that was being taken down on the oval. So we did that. We documented some landscape damage from a large donor event. If you can see here on this image, the oval there, it's got all these building shaped areas here on that they did a multi-million-dollar donor event and put up tents with platforms on them, and they were up for a week or two. And so they just basically destroyed the lawn, the oval in those areas. So gives them a bird's eye view of the damage and how much they could calculate to charge basically whoever to come out and to fix this. So because it wasn't OSU's fault on that one. So we wanted to document some new planning along Mirror Lake on the oval. And then Chris mentioned the wing trail. This was our next thing. We expanded into this. I won't go into detail on this either. I don't really have time to, but Chris, we've had so much success with this. We've been able to go out and fly like the entire main OSU campus, which has been amazing. We're still processing that, but it should, something that we're going to be able to, instead of paying Wolpert or another company or somebody to come in and fly our aerial imagery every 2 years, that we were able to go in with Chris and get this and get, we can get the aerial imagery updated whenever we want at a cheaper cost in the long run. So, and if Chris mentioned, this is a fixed wing, so it takes off and goes straight up from the ground, and it's pretty amazing to see. This probably needs to be updated. This was from Chris back in August. He had flown 4,113 total flight miles at that point. So pretty impressive. And this allows us to reach out across campus now and across the state to get all of our campuses and other agricultural sites and things like that, to keep those updated too, because we do keep track of those in ArcGIS and update all that stuff, those maps as well. So just to end, basically, we just kind of went from lift off to landing. We didn't know where we were going. We didn't know what we were doing, but now we pretty seasoned with what we got going on. So we're happy with that. Build relationships, like Chris mentioned. Yeah, that's definitely been a positive for us with him and his department. We've involved our students as best we can. We get them out there to help let them to fly the drone. We do have some students working for us in our office. So they're usually pretty eager to get out and see how it flies and then to fly it themselves. And then just be open to new opportunities, like whatever comes along, like Chris, now we're working together, hopefully to get that LiDAR payload and another drone for that. So lots of opportunities, and don't crash. That's the most important thing. Just don't go out and crash it. So we luckily haven't had that happen yet. So like I said, they're so easy to fly. It's been fun. And then if anybody has any questions for me, here's my email address. It's kidwell.87@osu.edu. If anybody wants to send me any questions. And then we just want to leave it here with this image, this beautiful image right here of Ohio Stadium. So thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Aaron. So we will get into our Q&A portion. We only have a couple minutes left. So for our first one is a question for Ben. Could you highlight any of the challenges your team faced with the drone operation? And then this same person also asked another question on, could you scale up the 3D augmented reality experience you use to cover large areas like an entire campus? Or do you see any technical limitations to the 3D AR experience over the phone? So the challenges and then the 3D AR experience.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. There are definitely a lot of challenges we face. I think as you saw from some of the other presentations, budget can definitely be a big factor when you're working with UASs, with drones of any sort. And we were pretty shoestring when we started out with this. And so we just got kind of my first drone play kit that we could afford and took it out there with us, and that didn't have the kind of visual interfaces that a lot of drones have these days. So it was really difficult to kind of maintain visual flight range with everything that we were doing and see what the drone was doing as it was flying. Getting trained was difficult, and then repairing the drone was a big problem too, because we were in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of Sicily, without access to replacement parts, without access to, like, there's no Best Buy. You can't just go pick up something. There's no hardware stores within, a 5-hour drive. And plus you have to do all of it in Italian. They don't have the same material that we have. So we got pretty good at, I got pretty good at piecing together the drone after, like, a propeller would get sand in it mid-flight and fall out of the sky and explode. I'd like flatten out door hinges with a hammer and use conservators epoxy to repair the arms of the drone, and then balance the new weight distribution with old rusty nails so that it would continue flying. Like, that kind of thing happened a lot. And then also, because this was kind of early in drone life, we had some hardware and software issues with one of the drones that we purchased. The initial tuna that we had would occasionally just lose all GPS lock and fall out of the sky on autopilot like missions. And so I would have to like immediately throw it into manual control and try to catch it before it hit the ground and exploded. So lots of problems, definitely. Then logistical ones about just transport. These things require a lot of equipment to support them. So getting them into and out of the field reliably is a big challenge, and just having really unfavorable conditions. So high winds, extraordinarily high temperatures, lots and lots of sand and dust and grit constantly all around them. No level terrain for takeoff and landing was a big problem. So yes, lots and lots of challenges. Happy to talk about more of them. And then for the second question that you had there, I think you certainly could scale up those AR experiences. I couldn't. I don't have that technical prowess, but it certainly is possible, since most of what the AR is delivering to the smartphone screen is just vector data for the most part. That doesn't really have big memory issues or file size issues. It would be pretty easy to deliver a campus-wide vector-based GIS to an AR experience, so long as you have all of the appropriate geolocated coordinates attached to all of the features that you want to visualize through your AR. Because, like, for example, that one that you saw, the really blurry images of, that was basically the size of a campus, just with a few red lines showing old trenches. It's when you start adding the high resolution raster imagery that becomes a problem. And using point clouds, as we saw, and I think Chris's presentation might make that easier in some cases. You can always export LAS data sets, which are going to be smaller file sizes than fully textured 3D models would be. And technical limitations, yeah, file sizes, operating systems for different phones, accessibility would be a challenge, I think. And then getting people to care. That's always been a problem that I've encountered with this sort of stuff. It's like, wow, this is a neat gimmick, but can we get people to care? Not always. Thank you for those questions.
Thank you so much. So for our next question is from it's for Aaron. Can you share a link to the GIS campus base map for anyone who is curious?
Yeah, we can do that. I actually don't even know what the web address is, honestly. So I don't know. I'll send it. I don't know. Can I send it to you, Garrick, or somebody, and then you can you have an email list or something? I'm not sure. Hold on. Let me just.
I'll grab it, Aaron. I can put it in the chat.
Okay, cool. Appreciate it. All right, grab it. Yeah. So, yeah, great.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I want to remind everyone that tomorrow is the keynote presentation for the Case of an Earth Archive by Chris Fisher. So if you would like to join in, please do at tomorrow at 11. And the link was just added. So if you are looking for that, you can find the GIS maps on the side in the chat.